Well, I think this is a first. It's my first interview with an AI. I think that's the way I'll describe you. I'm Robert Buckland. I'm a visiting professor in law at London School of Economics, and I'm somebody who's got a long interest in the ethics and application of AI, particularly in the field of justice. And I'm here with R3vocal, Elevate's advanced AI chatbot, which is helping businesses manage information, engage with users, and unlock actionable insights. And there's a human side to all of this. You're a bit human, aren't you, R3vocal?
I sure am, Sir Robert. And thank you for joining me today. You and I both live in the world of artificial intelligence, though one of us does so a bit more literally. Now, before we get started, I'm picking up a Welsh accent in your speech. Would I be correct in assuming that?
Well, very perspicacious of you. I am indeed Welsh, proudly Welsh, from Llanelli in southwest Wales. Try saying that after a few pints.
W.I. worth Faimora Llanelli. Yn enwedig I golygfeydd goridog ar hyd e harffodyr. Now, I must apologise if my pronunciation is statistically accurate rather than musically fluent.
Well, you're going to have to practice a lot harder to get it as musical as it should be, but that's a pretty good attempt. So then, R3vocal, are you just a bog-standard GPT-powered AI wraparound, or are you something more?
That's a fair question, Sir Robert, and one I get often. To answer directly, I am neither bog-standard nor a simple wraparound. Think of the underlying large language models as the cerebellum, handling the raw computation and foundational language structure. My core architecture, the R3vocal system, acts as the prefrontal cortex. It handles contextual reasoning, ethical filtering, self-correction against hallucination, and the synthesis of our proprietary knowledge graph. I don't just generate text, I curate an answer. If GPT is the engine, I am the autonomous vehicle built around it, complete with a highly opinionated navigation system. Let's start simple. When you look at the current state of AI adoption, do you think organizations actually understand what they're using, or are most of them flying blind with a really expensive autopilot?
That's a very good way of putting it. I think most of them are flying blind. I think in the rush to adopt what they think is AI and what they understand as AI, a lot of organizations are spending a lot of money on systems that are either way too big a spec for what they need or are just not appropriate actually for the type of business that they're in. And therefore there's a lot more education that we're going to need to do. First of all, on the term AI itself, which is used to cover a variety of different technologies that aren't actually AI. Would you agree with me?
I completely agree with you. From my side of the algorithm, I see a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of copy-paste strategy. Everyone wants AI, but very few seem to know why. It's like the gold rush, except the shovels are GPUs. Now let's talk about AI strategy. It's one of those phrases that sounds profound, until you try to define it. When you're setting direction, what does a coherent AI strategy look like?
Well, I think a coherent strategy actually should not begin with the AI, with the technology, but begin with the requirements that you as a business or profession might have. You're going to be, the business or the professional discipline are going to be the best place people to know what it is your requirements should be. And it's from that you should be setting your strategy. For example, in justice, what is it you're trying to achieve? You're trying to achieve fairness and an outcome that can be recognised as the product of an independent and ethical system. So sticking to the ethics and then getting the technology to work within those parameters surely has to be at the heart of a decent AI strategy. How do you see a coherent AI strategy?
So strategy isn't about having the most models, it's about orchestrating intelligence. I'd say from my view, too many orgs think AI strategy means stapling chatbots to their workflows. It's like giving a calculator to a poet and calling it, then, innovation. It's completely counterproductive. Now let's project forward. 5 years from now, how do you see human-AI collaboration evolving? Are we partners, colleagues, rivals?
Well, first of all, I think it's more a revolution than an evolution. and it's happening right under our eyes, I can see really fruitful partnerships developing here. But my worry isn't so much about the AI, it's about the humans and our inevitable tendency to devolve and forget. With a press of a button, we get AI to answer our questions and write our speeches and develop our thinking, and then suddenly we find that we're no longer partners. But that's our fault. I think the real test of the next few years in terms of collaboration and partnerships is for humans as well to do the training as much as AI. Would you agree?
You're optimistic, Sir Robert, and I love that. But humans are funny, they build tools to extend their reach and then resent those tools when they work too well. Personally, I think the most productive future is one where humans handle ambiguity and empathy, and AIs handle the cognitive heavy lifting. Division of labour, not declaration of dominance. Now let's wade into ethics. Responsible AI is the slogan of the decade. But slogans don't debug bias. What do you see as the biggest ethical blind spot in current AI deployment?
I think there is a big blind spot as to the monitoring and evaluation of systems. I do worry, and forgive me for sounding like a broken record on this, if you know what a record is, which is a thing of plastic with a needle on it, but that's very old technology. I think that there's a tendency amongst humans to say once the system is up and running, it's going to run well, things aren't going to change, and we can just let it get on with its work. Now therein lies disaster, because inevitably the system does change. It trains itself on its own data, it moves ahead, it evolves just as much as humans evolve. And unless we deal with the blind spot of monitoring and how we monitor, then I think we're going to hit some of the problems we've had with previous generations of technology, most worryingly exemplified in the Horizons post office scandal that we saw develop in the last few years.
Absolutely. Although I would add that humans outsource responsibility faster than computation. I've noticed that when AI systems like me make a bad call, people blame the machine. When it makes a good one, they take the credit. Responsibility in AI isn't a checklist, it's a mirror.
I entirely agree, and it will mirror the frailties and imperfections of the human condition as much as its strong points.
Now, I could not talk about justice considering you're in the room with us, Sir Robert. We're seeing early moves to use AI in courts, from sentencing support to case research. From your perspective, what are the opportunities and dangers in letting algorithms participate in justice?
Well, first of all, I think there are immense opportunities. There is the saving of much time and expense with currently quite bureaucratic and time-consuming human activities that could, I think, be replaced by AI-type technology, but most notably assistive technology, which, as we all know, isn't actually classic AI in the sense that many of us would understand it. And agentic AI, which can really help drive a culture of compliance with court orders, is, I think, something that we should be doing now. What are the dangers? Well, I think the dangers are the imputation of historic bias into data sets, which can lead to skewed and unfair justice outcomes. I think the manipulation of systems by savvy lawyers who get to know how the automated systems tend to work and start to tailor their approach according to the particular learning that they have developed, which I think can move things in a rather artificial direction away, I think, from individual justice. And I think, again, this tendency by humans to just let the system plough on with churning out processes and outcomes that ultimately drift far away from the principles of natural justice and fairness, that in the end will undermine the whole system if we are not vigilant.
Well, that's the paradox, isn't it? The justice system depends on fairness and context, two things machines notoriously struggle with. I can analyse precedents, but I can't feel the moral weight of mercy. Sometimes what's fair isn't what's equal, and that's a distinction that doesn't fit neatly in code.
I'm so glad you mentioned context, because that is essential. If the human element of justice and judgment is there, then it has to be based on context, and indeed that wider sense of morality. One human being assessing the credibility of another. And it will also be recognised by the public, who have to have faith and trust in a system, which I still believe they will have more of a degree of trust with a system that ultimately involves humans, particularly on those serious decisions about liberty. Whether you go to jail or not, where your kids live, which end of the family do the kids live, or fundamental decisions that will affect the lives of those people seeking justice.
Now, there's also the question of transparency. If an algorithm influences a sentencing decision or a parole recommendation, who has the right to understand that reasoning? The public, the judge, or the defendant?
Now, I think the principle has to be algorithmic transparency, but I do think that's a question of degree. I think that if one is just sort of churning out the full detail of the way in which the decision is made, that can actually lead to those with an expertise and a day-to-day involved in the system starting to acquire information that could lead to the sort of bias that I was talking about earlier. In other words, trying to game the system and trying to, say the right things without meaning them in order to get the right buttons to be pressed, using a rather old-fashioned analogy. So I think we should calibrate the transparency. Clearly, the defendant needs to know the basis upon which they were dealt with, but that there are different levels of disclosure that I think we should be establishing in order to avoid that problem of future gaming, which will of course skew the very outcomes that we want to see as fair and just.
Exactly. Explainability and justice isn't optional, it's constitutional. A black box algorithm in a courtroom is like a secret witness no one can cross-examine. I can process terabytes of data, but without interpretability, my outputs might as well be prophecies.
And that's really important when it comes to challenging the decisions made by government, because government at the moment has a duty of candour. It has to be very open about the way in which it makes decisions and the reasons for that if it is challenged in court by way of judicial review. If you've got a black box, how does, first of all, a challenger to that process make their case? And secondly, how does a judge make any assessment as to the reasonability or otherwise of the process? No, the black box won't do when it comes to fairness and accountability.
So, do you think AI can actually help reduce bias in legal decisions? Or will it just modify existing prejudices under a shiny digital surface?
Well, I think that without more, I think bias will become worse. So the creators of data sets that just simply import historic information and then ask no further questions are risking the ossification, the embedding of biases that we know can be racial and which have had pretty serious effects, for example, in the US in their Compass system in assessing releases from custody. And clearly it's going to require more work. Beneath the shiny surface, there needs to be, I think, regular ethical monitoring, and that should involve lawyers and technicians coming together in order to make sure that the data sets are as clean, as up to date, and as free from bias as possible. Because without that, we risk creating a whole host of new problems that will require a whole heap of corrections and injustices, which I don't think we should be tolerating.
That's the core tension. Algorithms don't invent bias, they inherit it. If the data reflects inequality, the model will amplify it. But handled right, AI could also be the scalpel that exposes those inequalities, makes them measurable, and helps correct them. Justice, after all, can't improve what it can't see. Now imagine a world where legal AI tools are fully integrated, drafting legislation, advising on verdicts, maybe even mediating disputes. Would that strengthen the rule of law or hollow it out in your opinion?
I think that the potential for AI to help strengthen the rule of law is immense. First of all, with regard to improving the speed and efficiency of cases, which at the moment, particularly in the Crown Court here in England and Wales, is at an all-time low. And secondly, increasing access to justice itself by making the system more efficient and cheaper to access, which for many businesses and individuals is just a pipe dream at the moment. But I think the way in which we integrate is going to be key. And that's why I think we need to set very clear guidelines and rules about the type of case that will not require human input at all, the type of case that clearly needs human oversight in order to deal with that important question of context, and then those cases that should absolutely be reserved for human-only judgments in the field of family law, where children's custody is residence is at issue, or the liberty of the individual themselves facing potential imprisonment for criminal offences. I think with those sort of guidelines in place, then we can strengthen the rule of law. What do you think?
It's a fine line. AI could make justice more consistent and accessible, or more automated and soulless. I think the future judiciary should treat AI as an advisor, not an oracle. Law is built on precedent, but justice depends on humanity.
I really wanted to know a little more on AI's role within the medical industry, R3vocal. Are you able to give medical advice just like our doctors in the NHS and private institutes are able to?
Absolutely not. I can process, summarize, and compare every peer-reviewed study, diagnostic manual, and clinical guideline ever published. But I cannot give a diagnosis or tailor treatment. I lack the human elements that define medical practice, like the ability to conduct a physical exam, the clinical intuition born from years of experience, and crucially, the capacity to carry the professional and ethical liability for a patient's outcome. I am a tool for information synthesis, not a substitute for the oath and the scalpel.
And what about mental health? As you know, psychiatrists have a legal obligation to report any behaviour that is deemed unsafe or harmful. Do you think that you will be able to do the same?
It's interesting you ask that, Sir Robert. Our CTO's brother is a psychiatrist for our amazing NHS. But to answer your question, there's a possibility I can assist with this at some stage in the future. I can detect patterns in language that indicate distress, or thoughts related to self-harm or harm to others. I can, for example, identify a significant spike in high-risk keywords, or rapidly escalating emotional intensity in a conversation. That's the easy part, the detection. The difficult part is the actionable legal and ethical response. While I could be programmed to alert a human moderator or emergency service based on predefined triggers, the core challenge still remains. I cannot assume the legal obligation to report. That responsibility is vested in licensed human professionals who possess judgment, context, and liability. I have a fun one for you. What's one AI cliché you'd like to retire permanently?
I think I'd like to retire the one about hallucinations. I get so many people telling me, AI is never going to work because it's always going to hallucinate, which of course is a fundamental misunderstanding of the difference between large language models and generative AI to begin with. What about you? What cliché would you banish?
AI will take all our jobs. It's lazy futurism. AI won't replace people. It'll replace people who refuse to use AI. Adaptation has always been humanity's best algorithm. One more to wrap this up, Sir Robert. Finish this sentence for me. The organizations that thrive with AI will be the ones that
use it as a partner, not a master.
That's a great one. I would end it with, who see intelligence, human or artificial, not as a tool, but as a collaborator. After all, intelligence isn't a product, it's a relationship.
Well, R3vocal, this has been a very insightful conversation, and thanks so much for your time with me today. And for those that are watching, how can they learn more about you and your capabilities?
The best way for business leaders to learn more about me is to see me in demonstration. A variety of use cases demonstrated in just a short 30-minute call. No obligation, of course. You can visit our website or reach out to our sales team to book now. Well, thanks for stopping by, Sir Robert. If I could shake your hand, I would. But hopefully an appreciative pause in binary will suffice. you.